Superheroes are often known for their iconic costumes, and Marvel has given us a lot of great, fantastic superhero costumes. For years now, we have seen several sleek, well-designed, elegant costumes. However, they don't always get it right. There are also a ton of really awful costumes that no one asked for, wanted, or liked looking at. We are going to be looking at 10 of the worst Marvel superhero costumes. From 90s Black Widow to Captain Ultra. Follow us as we highlight 10 of the worst things a major superhero has ever worn. Emma Frost. We begin our list with one of the female superheroes in X-Men, Emma Frost. She came into the X-Men fray in 1980 with a bang, and that's what the creative team of the X-Men must have thought. Her costume was a provocative outfit, and she's been wearing some variation of it ever since. Just when we thought we have seen enough, Emma Frost's costume in the new X-Men run from the early 2000s was a bit too far. The costume made very little practical sense. Its only purpose was to reinforce the male gaze of Emma, leading to a lot of similarly misguided costumes of female characters. Emma is known for pushing the boundaries in fashion and the world of mutants, but this one, we think she must have pushed it too far. Walrus. Sometimes a costume might look extraordinarily bad at first glance, but over time it begins to look relatively okay. The Walrus costume is the exception. Possibly the lone occupant of the E-list among Marvel villains, Walrus easily stands out in a crowd thanks to his ridiculous costume. This Defenders villain has a simple enough getup, literally adopting the look of a walrus with the brown color, tusks, and whiskers. What on earth is the odd rainbow-colored insignia on his chest? Why is it even there? These are questions we feel the producer should have asked the brain behind this absurdity. Yes, there is nothing wrong with proudly displaying the rainbow, but in a costume this bad, it just seems completely out of place. Adam X, the Extreme. Well, let's just say we aren't too surprised by this next one. Adam X is a perfect representation of all the worst tendencies of the 90s. The superhero is so extreme that his codename is actually Extreme. If you're looking for a costume that goes way overboard, you need not look too far from Adam X's costume. How else can you explain the numerous and pointless razor-sharp talons sticking out of his wrists, shoulders, armbands, and his back? An embodiment of the 90s, his wild mane of blonde hair with myriad rat tails also echoes a lot of early 90s looks. Unfortunately for Extreme, but fortunate for fans, he faded away before he could come up with a worse costume. Hawkeye. How do we even begin this one? Over the years, Hawkeye has proven that he can give any superhero a run for their money when it comes to donning the most absurd outfits. But there is a version that just beats every contender. After the epic events of the Kree Skrull War, Hawkeye decides he needs a makeover, which is not a bad thing. What we don't seem to understand is why he abandons his classic Silver Age costume for a sleeveless tunic and skirt. The costume is an embarrassment to look at, and that's without considering the ridiculous headband. Luckily for us, the look didn't last long and Hawkeye was back in his usual duds as a West Coast Avenger. Elektra from Marvel Knights. Like many other female superheroes, Elektra enters the comic world with a costume that makes little sense. One that is too simple for a ninja who regularly gets into duels to the death. But somehow, her fans loved it. Then, during the Nemesis storyline in the Marvel Knights period, she pushes it to an absurd extreme. Maybe she is related to Adam the Extreme. You may ask how absurd it was. The entire costume is held together with thin red straps that barely cover anything. Given the fact that she died by taking a sigh to the heart, you may think she would armor up a little bit. Our beloved superhero had other ideas. Spider-Woman, Charlotte Witter. The likes of Jessica Drew, Jennifer Carpenter, or Gwen Stacy owned some of the coolest Spider-Woman looks in Marvel Comics. Then, there's Charlotte Witter, who owns one of the worst. Her green and yellow fashion embarrassment erases all the memories of beautiful Spider-Woman costumes we had. Charlotte hunted down the other women who held the title to absorb their powers, when she should have taken time out to hunt down a fashion consultant. Wildside. It feels like creative teams of the 90s were seeing something that others couldn't see. That is the only explanation for some of the misguided creations of that period. Wildside is no stranger to strange things, as he commits numerous comic book sins. For one, he's a boring and mostly forgotten 90s villain. He harasses X-Force as a member of the Mutant Liberation Front, and accomplishes almost nothing. Finally, he looks absolutely ridiculous, with exaggerated white hair, claws, huge shoulder pads, and a cape. If the designer was trying to create something wild to reflect Wildside's name, he went too far. He could easily have added a kitchen sink to the costume in that case. Or maybe it was an oversight. Magneto. It may shock you to hear the mention of Magneto. Yes, Magneto has one of the best costumes in all of comic books. But like every other major Marvel character, he switches up his clothes from time to time. In the Dawn of X saga, he's wearing a white version of his classic costume. However, back in the 80s, when he was also part of the X-Men and the fight for mutant rights, he wore one of the less glamorous costumes in superhero history. He dons an outrageous sleeveless purple outfit, which only gets worse with the huge stylistic M on his chest. Magneto tried hard to turn over a new leaf in the 80s, but we still would have preferred the old costume. Wonder Man. Like the Walrus, Wonder Man has never really had a good costume. He's only really had bad costumes, with some only being less bad than the others. Therefore, it's not surprising that he has one of the worst costumes in Marvel history. The costume has a big red W on the chest area, which is better than his latter, more well-known version as a West Coast Avenger. However, this costume undermines it with some busy yellow and red elements that stray into Vision territory. Add a jetpack to this monstrosity, and the whole thing flies apart. Invisible Woman, the 90s. Last but not least is Invisible Woman of the 90s. Yes, the 90s strike again. Sue Storm has more bad costumes than good ones, but the 90s gave her one of the absolute worst costumes of all time. For some reason best known to them, the creative team behind the Fantastic Four in the 90s decided the Invisible Woman needed to be more visible, leading to this dreadful experiment. The costume begged endless questions, starting with the need for the long white gloves. The Invisible Woman didn't quite get a fitting look in the late 90s, at least not until later. There you have it, the 10 worst Marvel superhero costumes of all time. So, which do you think is the most appalling? Let us have your thoughts via the comments section. We'd be more than happy to hear from you. And if you enjoyed watching this video, don't forget to hit the like and share buttons. Last but not least, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more exciting videos like this. Thanks for watching. See you next time.